Sorry, I got the little button. I had to hit the go button. I am a DTM. I've been in District 29 for. Is that better?
That's much better.
I can't hear in them. So if you see me with my ears, but you guys can't hear me without it. So I'm going to go with that. So I am Kim Choplin. I'm a distinguished Toastmaster. Have been in Toastmasters for more years than I want to count now, 9. And I am excited to lead the panel today to talk about all the fun things with the International Speech Competition. And to join us today, we have 2 past district winners that I'm going to let them introduce themselves. If you want, we can do this like we do interviews when you're standing up there after you finally can breathe for just a little bit. We do the contestant interviews. So I'm going to start with ladies first. Elisa, can you give us the normal? What's your name, your club name, and how long you've been a Toastmasters?
I am Elisa Everts. I am an indistinguished Toastmaster. I belong to Winner's Circle, Speakers Bureau, and sometimes Herndon Reston Club. And I think I started in 2017.
Okay. So can you give us a 30-second summary about your winning speech?
I can. Spicy was about how adversity can be turned into an advantage, and keeping your sense of humor about it can help you prevail. My being deaf in my left ear, my mother's blindness, my father's mental illness, our poverty, blah, blah, blah. I encourage my listeners to view such experiences not as a hole that they had to crawl out of, but as a mountain that they had climbed and conquered, giving them a view of the world that others do not have. And I recommend using humor to face your adversity and be defiant and overcome in that way, basically.
That's great. And by the way, I've heard that speech many times, and I know there's a lot more in that blah, blah, blah part. David, I'm going to go to you now. We'll do the same thing. Can you tell me your name, club name, and how long you've been a Toastmaster?
Well, which David? Is David Kirsten a district champion too? Okay, I thought he was.
Nope, David, you're stuck with me today. David Hollingsworth, you're stuck with me today.
I'll be happy to. David Hollingsworth, I've been a Toastmaster since 2013, same as you, and representing at different times Winner's Circle as well as Speakers Bureau, but members of both. And the speech I did was called Capability, and it was a story about my mom's journey from getting kicked out of nursing school and raising 4 kids as a single parent to getting her nursing degree at age 70. And I hung that on kind of the hero's journey / superhero type story. And what I tried to do in that was to kind of show an emotional journey, but also make one point that whatever you do, you've got to do what needs to get done.
Perfect. And I know your speech as well, because I think you beat me that year. Okay, so
I was surprised too.
I was not. It was a great speech. Both of you guys do great speeches, and I'm so excited to have you on the panel today. Before we officially ask you questions, is there anything that you guys want to do as an opening statement to the audience? Start with David this time.
Okay, sure. One of the reasons I got into Toastmasters, I had done it in the 90s and kind of fell away from it as I was raising kids, was I saw a movie called Speak. And Mark Brown, who was the 1995 world champion, there's a moment in the movie where he looks at the camera and says, "You have a story. And there's someone out there who needs to hear it." And that just hit me hard. That I think all of us have a story that runs throughout our own lives, and we don't think much of it until we really break it down and see how can that help somebody else. And that got me into Toastmasters, and that's why I did that whole journey, and I think that's why anybody should do that journey. They have a story, and somebody out there needs to hear it.
Great. That sounds, you're spot on there. Elisa, what about you?
Yes, I agree with that completely. Around 2015, I read Strength Finders and took that test. And the most important thing about that was just focusing on, we have a tendency to focus on our weaknesses instead of our strengths. And I have always loved public speaking, and it has always been one of my best strengths, but I didn't spend a lot of time cultivating that. And I decided my goal in 2017 was going to be to join Toastmasters and start working on that. And it has transformed my life. It has made me much more capable of bringing messages to people that have the power to affect their lives positively than I had before. So it has been beautiful. I'm super, super grateful.
Perfect. Okay, so now let's talk about competing. I'm so excited. It's competition season again. Okay, first question. And I'm gonna do this just back and forth. I'll ask one to one person and then the next one goes to, so we'll start with Lisa and then the next question will go to David and we'll just hop back and forth. And if for some reason someone says, I really want to answer that one too, just let me know. If anybody in the audience has additional questions, we'll try to save some time at the end, put them in the chat and we'll run through them at that, okay?
Sure.
Okay, so to compete or not to compete? If you survey most Toastmasters, there are always a reason why they're not participating in competitions. What motivated you to participate in a club contest? Elisa?
I wanted to get better, and giving a speech one time, I don't think gives you that opportunity. But competing and having it's not about winning. It's about improving your own skills, and competing and giving that speech over and over and getting more and more feedback from people gives you an opportunity to fine tune the different elements of your speech that you don't have when you keep giving different speeches every time you talk. You might improve some things, but developing gestures and developing intonation and developing your vocal variety, that's stuff that you can do best by focusing on one speech and making that speech as beautiful as you can. Competing, I learned more competing. I improved more competing in a few months than I had the whole prior year and a half, 2 years I had been in Toastmasters. So that is why.
Perfect. Someone told me when I first competed that if I was going to compete for a trophy, I should just go buy one down the street.
Yes, yes.
Okay, David. For those in the audience who think that they aren't going to enter into a club contest, what's the one piece of advice that you would give them to convince them to enter?
Sure. The one thing that I would tell them is get over yourself. Because I know Elisa said that she didn't care about winning, and I've gotten to a point where winning is less important than the trophy. I mean, just like Narayan, I've got a whole wall of trophies downstairs that I haven't moved up here to my current office, that say that I've been in a lot of competitions, but and also winning is fun. Anybody who says they don't care about winning might lie.
No,
about
I
other
didn't
things.
say I don't care about it. I do like winning, but it's not my primary goal.
Right.
I enjoy winning.
Right. Winning feels awesome. And
Yes.
that's one of the reasons that I would tell, because especially when you're at the club level, it's not easy, because the very first competition I was in, I was with Vast in Fairfax, and it was fall, and they said, "Oh, we've got our humor speaking contest coming up," and I think I'm a funny guy. I've been doing stand up for a while. I've been on stage at Stand Up New York, at the DC Improv about 7 times, and I think I know what's funny. So I got on my first competition and lost at the club level. And I thought, how could that be? And then I learned about, okay, here's how Toastmasters does things. It's not important enough just to be funny. You've got to say something. And that was my first lesson in competing, is have something to say. So I did actually give people two pieces of advice. Get up and compete regardless of your ability or your place in your journey.
Yeah.
And the second is have something to say. Something that the people at the end of your speech will say, huh, I never thought about it that way. And then I think that's the right attitude to go into it with, is don't go in with winning as the only focus, but go in with improvement as the focus, and I think you'll do well.
Right. That's perfect advice. Elisa, topics. Those are always the hard thing. How did you come up with your speech idea?
Honestly, I don't know where my speeches come from. It's like I wake up in the morning one day, literally, I wake up the wee hours of the morning and some little kernel of a speech, like a line or an idea, starts sort of flowing through me. But I'm not saying you have to be a mystic to come up with good speech ideas. In that speech actually evolved out of my icebreaker when I had a need to let my fellow Toastmasters know that I'm deaf in one ear so that I wouldn't offend people by them speaking to me and not answering them and them thinking that I was a snob. So that led to me telling the story that I opened that speech with. And I also thought I didn't want to give a boring icebreaker. I'm from Kansas and I'm a teacher and this is my education, whatever. I wanted to give a spicier version of my biography in that icebreaker. So I thought I'll be transparent and I'll tell some of the difficult, painful, interesting things that have happened to me that make me different from everybody else in this room. Which in the end, when you tell those things, you also find the things that make you the same as everybody else in that room. So by being vulnerable and showing those things that sometimes we are ashamed of, you make people like you. This is something people need to learn when you're speaking. People like you more when you have some disability or some challenge. And if you want somebody, like if a man wants to pick up a girl, put a cast on your leg and walk through the park. They will like you more. You can pick up girls that way.
Or get a dog.
Or get
Dogs
a
are easier.
dog, or borrow someone's child. But if you have any kind of disadvantage in life, it makes people feel closer to you. And so it's a good idea at the beginning of your speeches to make people laugh and also to tell them some weakness of yours, because if you make them laugh and you tell them some transparent thing about yourself, they will like you from the get-go, and that's going to make them more receptive to whatever you have to say. So that kind of, I didn't think about all of that consciously as I crafted that speech. I was thinking, I want to be interesting, I want to be different from everyone else, I want to be transparent, and I want to make my icebreaker not just about me. I want to make it about my audience. I want to the thing that I will always tell you is, I think the most important thing about speaking is loving your audience. Mm-hmm. That you need to have a message that you are loving your audience with. That's far more important than winning. The wonderful thing about winning is that every time you win, you get to go to a bigger audience and you get to get your message to more people. So winning is really about reaching more hearts, more minds with whatever message it is that's sort of flowing through you. That's where my speech ideas come from.
Perfect. Okay, David, you're going to top this now.
Oh, no.
That was hard to top now. Excuse me. I have a little lingering thing that I just can't seem to get rid
Sure.
of. So I apologize for coughing on everybody. Thankfully, we're not up close and personal.
My
So
mask is downstairs.
Personal.
talking about topic selection,
Sure.
do you have tips for something for anyone who says, hey, I can't think of anything to talk about?
Well, I think that is that's a frequent thing that everybody runs into is they're looking for the great idea or the perfect topic or the perfect slug line to hang on their speech, and you got to get over that. When I've been writing speeches or telling stories at the Moth or somewhere else, is you got to get over having the great idea. Start with an idea.
Mhm.
And take it and see how far it goes. When I've been writing stand-up bits, sometimes you start with something and you work on it for 6 weeks and it turns out to be nothing. But other times you take something that I don't think may be a great idea, but eventually turns into a really, really good one because you improve it over time. So there have been, uh, you know, because I've gone through like the 25 years of winning speeches and try to see what are the commonalities. There are a lot of commonalities, but there's a lot of individuality there too. So it's and you take some that are like really inspirational, really great ideas, and then you like have Ed Tate's who starts with it's just one of those days. It's something that everybody's heard, everybody's gone through, and to call back to Elisa's point is find things that everybody has in common. And the more you can connect with the things that everybody can feel, it's not always the great idea. It's sometimes it's the basic emotion behind it that people can connect to. So the advice I would give people is choose a topic, something that sticks with you. Like you hear somebody say something that, that's interesting. Grab that and build a story or speech behind it. And I think that's, for me, has been a better path to choosing a topic.
Perfect.
Can I add to that?
Sure, Lisa.
I think that for one thing, people will remember your stories more than they will remember
your points. Yeah.
Your points. But I always think of Maya Angelou saying, people are not going to remember the stuff you said. What they will remember is how you made them feel.
Mm-hmm.
So when you tell a story and you aim at creating emotions or provoking emotions in your audience, make them laugh, make them cry, make them angry, make them indignant. If you can create feelings, they're going to remember that, and that is going to have a longer impact. So
yeah, that's one of my mottos is make them laugh, make them cry, make them kiss 5 to 7 minutes goodbye. And the more emotions you can bring out in your time on stage, the more they're going to remember you and the more you're going to stand out.
Perfect. I had a friend tell me when I first started that he kept a little notebook, just one of those little bitty 1-inch notebooks that when something popped in his head, he would jot it down. Mm-hmm. He said, I'd probably go 5 or 6 pages and never take anything further from a speech. But every once in a while, something would go, oh, that's the thing that started the whole speech. So like you said, something that caught your mind, something that you woke up in the middle of the night and went, oh, this is the idea. That's how a lot of people start, with just that. This is what I think. This is what I heard.
Right.
Okay. So speech delivery. Elisa, how did you adjust your speech when you saw the green, yellow, or red light come on?
I don't adjust my speech because I memorize my speeches. I know there are many Toastmasters that they feel that you should not memorize your speech, but I have to memorize my speech. Choosing the exact right word is really important to me. And the older I get, the harder it is for me to find the right word unless I have already thought about it. So the only thing that I would do is speed up if I know that I have too much left to say when I see that card. But I practice so that I know how much I have to have finished by 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes in. And yeah, is that not the answer that you wanted?
No, that's perfect because that's a lot of practice, practice, practice.
Yeah.
That's a great, that's the motto of Toastmasters on many occasions, just practice, practice, practice.
Yeah, I do my speeches hundreds of times before I present them.
Okay. And so I know I gave you guys some prepared questions, but I'm going to adjust a little bit on these because some of the speech delivery ones don't count at the moment in the virtual world.
Sure.
So David, I'm going to ask you, how do you adjust your speech to the use of this stage versus the big stage?
Sure. The it's funny, you know, one of the things that I watch and pay attention to are how the contest changes every year by who wins, right?
Mm.
And I think the when we went to virtual, a lot of people were lost and to say, okay, I've got to look right at the camera, I've got to be right here. And you know, I think the first time they did it, a lot of people at district level were disqualified because they went off camera, they did whatever, and the winner that year, or I think it was the second year they did virtual, was a master at using this space.
Oh yeah, he was.
Um,
Yeah.
and so then the next year you see, well, everybody's going to do that. So I think there may be some best practices that are useful, but I think it's adapt yourself to that stage. I would try to do it so that it doesn't turn out as a gimmick, because I really hate gimmicks. You know, this is like me and props. You know, I think you can tell a story. You know, looking straight at the camera. I think somebody could win by looking straight at the camera, and if the story is good enough, never coming, you know, never moving to left or right or forward or back. If Because I think the story is the most important thing. But record everything you do and then get other perspectives on it so that you can say, okay, does this work? If I'm dropping my pitch because I'm hitting a more important point, you know, when I whisper or bring a stage whisper, what do I need to do with the camera? So it's one more factor that you have to deal with. So you have to adapt to that stage, but I don't think there's any science to it other than make it possible for people to still pay attention and don't be distracting with your stage movements, because I've seen people, looks like a 3D movie. You know, they're always going forward and back and, you know, doing, you know, it's like watching something where you're on a roller coaster because they're moving so much and it becomes distracting. So there's a happy medium between being frozen and moving all over the place.
Gotcha. Elisa, anything to add to that?
I think people who are using the Zoom format are doing themselves a disservice when they give the speech sitting in their chair and not standing up and making use of the room that they're in. So I set up my speech area and move around, partly because one of the things that happens when you move is that your right and left brain talk to each other, and that helps you to remember stuff. And then if you are blocking and you're doing the past over here and the present over here and the future over here, for instance, that is really helpful to you in remembering where you're at in your speech, but it's also helpful for your audience to follow the topic of your speech when they are associating different positions with a particular topic or a particular part of the speech. So it's good for your brain, it's good for your memory, and it's good for your audience's brain for you to move around a little bit.
Well,
but of course,
it's also good for your emotional impact too, because when you're moving around, you yourself tend to be more involved in the story.
that's true too. Yeah.
I always did it for timing as well. I knew I was supposed to be standing here talking about
Yeah.
this by the time
Yeah.
by the time that green light came on, I should be over here. And if I'm not over here, there's an issue. I need to do something to make sure I was farther along.
Yeah, that's helpful.
So let's kind of go back to nervousness a little bit, because a lot of people starting speeches or starting into contest are nervous. And I see there's a question too about feeling the pressure being part of something. So were you nervous? And is that a good thing or a bad thing? Let's start with David on this one.
Anybody who's been in a contest with me knows that I don't like to talk to people before I go on stage. I mean, after I'm fine. But you'll see me kind of pacing the hall and kind of playing things over my head or listening on my headphones. I do get nervous before every time I get on stage. But I try to manage that by not engaging with people, because I don't want to be thinking about that at the time. So yeah, it's okay to be nervous, but I find that for me, I like to turn that into energy when I first get on. Because it's like when I've done stand up, you get that first laugh and then, boy, okay, we're good. If you don't get that first laugh, it's going to be a long time on stage. But I think it's okay to be nervous, but try to turn that into your energy when you first get on stage and connect with the audience.
Okay. Elisa, can you describe the feeling just as your name is called for when you step on stage for that first contest?
For the first contest? Oh, you mean how I felt like
Yeah,
for the
how did you
district
feel
contest?
at the district level contest when they called your name and you stepped on stage? What was that feeling like at that point?
Finally.
Please let me get this done.
I've been waiting and listening to all these other speeches, and finally I get to talk. And I'm not saying I didn't love all those other speeches too, but like you're so hyped and prepared for that, and it's such a release to like be able to do it. I've been speaking as a professor for 30 years, so I'm really comfortable walking in front of a new audience and talking. There's a little bit of nervousness when you have a new audience, but again, if you focus, if you're all about you and your performance, then I think you're going to be more nervous than if you walk into a room thinking, here's a room full of people that I am going to try to connect with and love in some way by what I'm about to do. If I am focused more on my audience than I am on myself, I'm less nervous. But you do need enough nervousness to facilitate the adrenaline that you need to do well too. So you need a balance of nerves.
Mm-hmm.
You need to find that sweet spot for your nerves where you are using it to fuel your performance, but also feeling peaceful about your role in the room. This is the place where you're supposed to be right now. I feel like the universe has arranged for you to be in this room with these people at this time, and that is right. It is right. You should feel the rightness of it, and you should be able to just sort of like flow with that rightness with your audience.
Okay.
There's something I'd like to tag on to with what Elisa said is there's also a range of believability for you as a speaker. So again, going back to comedy, if you've got somebody who's very reserved and their mannerisms are very close, if they get on stage and act like Robin Williams, they're not going to be believable. So same thing as a speaker. If you are changing your style completely to try to win, it's going to come off as inauthentic or unauthentic. It's going to come off as hokey. How's that? you're going to look like you're performing. And that's another one of my pet peeves is don't copy other speakers. Find what works for you and improve on that.
Okay. So let's talk about winning at the district level.
Sure.
What did you feel when they started to call your name as the winner? I'll let either one of you guys choose what you.
I was standing in the back of the room of the auditorium, and actually what I was thinking was, I think they're going to call my name. And where am I going to put this stuff that I'm holding in order to walk to the front of the stage? That's what I was thinking.
Those are normal things that we. David?
Yeah, it was a little weird because I figured I thought I was in the top half, but I have been in other contests before where they called off 5 of the 6 or 6 of the 7 speakers, and then I have people looking at me and like pointing me, and I'm like, "Don't look at me," and they didn't call me at all, so I didn't even place. I'm like, so it's hard to judge who really won because you don't know who the judges are, you don't know a lot of things. But in our contest, I figured I was in the top half, but it could have gone any one of 3 ways. And Kimberly, they said yours is third. I'm like, okay, I either, didn't disqualify. So I'm either like didn't place at all or 1 or 2. And I'm sitting in the back of the room because I don't like being at the front of the room for anything. And they mentioned, and when they said second place and it started with a D, I'm like, well, there you go. And they said the other name, everybody's head in that part of the room just turned and looked at me and like, what are you looking at me for? So it was more when they said second place, I was like, holy cow, this is it. So I was surprised, but pleasantly surprised because I never expect to win. That's just more my Midwestern whatever creeping in. But boy, was it fun.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I will say I was surprised how good I felt. That really surprised me. Sometimes I don't know why it surprised me so much, but there was a feeling of elation that I didn't expect. It was excellent.
Yeah, I was comparing it with how I felt, towards the end of the story versus that, because one of the things I noticed, again, that particular story is a real tearjerker. I could see people crying in the audience. I'm like, okay, Dave, keep your voice steady because you don't want to break down too. I felt more connected there, but when they said my name, I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. It was a moment of fun.
Okay. So there's a question in the audience that says, did you feel like the pressure of being part of the contest is something you were looking for? Elisa? Is the pressure from being in a contest something that you're looking for?
You mean in that it motivates you to perform better?
Michael, you want to expand on your question?
Yeah, I could expand. So you were talking about earlier that you were looking for competitions to increase the amount of speeches that you make. And the way I was thinking about it, I mean, you could go to other clubs to do that. And if you were part of if you started doing a contest, to me, that was more about bringing more pressure to yourself so that you can perform in front of a wider audience. Was that something that you were looking for? Or is that something that just getting more experience in front of more people? Is that what you were looking for?
I think the pressure does make me perform better, knowing it's kind of an accountability thing, knowing that people are watching you to see whether you did improve or not. I guess pressure is motivating in that way, yeah. And putting things on the calendar and having a deadline for them. When there's a contest, you don't get to just like reschedule with your club, you know,
Right.
like I wasn't ready for it, I'm going to reschedule. Contest dates don't give you that out. So pressure is facilitating.
So
in that
it sounds like it's more for accountability then.
Yes.
You're even more accountable because now you have a timeline, you have more people watching, and you have to do it at this date.
I
Yeah,
think there's more pressure that comes along with that. But that to me is not the thing I'm seeking. That's something that just happens.
right.
And the reason I would say, the contest is better than just going to other clubs. If you go to other clubs, I think the biggest audience you're going to have is about 10 people, maybe 15 people. As you go through, area, division, and district, your audiences get bigger.
Mhm.
And stories react differently, or audiences react differently to things that you say. People will laugh at something in one audience that is just crickets in another.
Mhm.
And, and the first time it happens, it's kind of scary because you've got a line that has worked, has killed every time.
Yeah.
And then you do it for a larger audience and there's just nothing. You're like, okay. Your head is telling you all sorts of things about, what to do next. So one of the things that I think happens is that you get that experience for how a speech resonates with different sizes and different types of audiences.
Mhm.
And you learn how to gauge those reactions and allow them to think. So a speech that works fine at the club level may be one that clearly, consistently goes over time at district and that level because audiences laugh.
Mhm.
Kwang Lee, when I saw him at the World Championships in 2018, had a killer speech. I thought he was the best person on stage, but he let the audience laugh for like 45 seconds one time. And that just put him way over. So you have to be aware of how the audience is going to affect that. So it's not so much pressure for me as it is learning how a story changes with a different size of audience.
Okay, I can see that. Thank you. Kim, you're muted.
Let's try that again. That was a great answer. But there's a question in the chat about having to have a different speech once you get past district level. I thought the rule used to be if you made it into the finals for that final 9, you had to do a different speech.
That's still the rule. And also the speeches at the finals, and I would love to see for somebody to get that far. It has to be one you've never used in a semifinal or final previously. So, and that was a reaction to, I think, Manoj Vasudevan, who pretty much used the same speech twice in a semifinal and a final. It was retooled a little bit, but a lot of people
That's not
complained.
okay. Yeah.
Then they changed the rules.
Okay. So the new rule is that, or the rule is that you can keep the same speech that you won at district all the way through to the semifinals, but you have to have a new speech for the final.
Correct. Now, I've seen people who don't have that speech until they win at the semifinals, and that's been disastrous for several people. But if you've been in Toastmasters, more than a year, you should have more than one speech. And it may not be your best speech. I mean, usually you try to use the best speech for getting to that point. But the second one should be pretty good too. But I think you should have 2 before you start at district.
Okay. So let's talk about the changes in your speeches from when you did it at the club level versus when you made it to district. How much did your speech change between the beginning and the I won at districts? Or did it?
It did. It did. Mine changed dramatically when I joined Winner's Circle.
Mhm.
And the two things happened. One, I joined Winner's Circle, and Cheryl and Narayan were the most amazing coaches. And they met with me a couple of times and helped me with my blocking and gestures and stuff like that. And Narayan is a master at knowing where to put a joke in a speech. So he helped me bring a little bit more humor into my speech than was previously there. But the other thing that I did besides going to these clubs where they do round robin was I went to like 12 different clubs and practiced my speech with new audiences, because it's one thing when you give a speech to an audience that has already seen that speech. It becomes less and less, you're less and less able to tell whether the speech is getting better, because people have heard it so many times. You can't really gauge its impact on a new audience.
Mhm.
But the other thing that was important for me was at that time, my brain kept freezing and I kept forgetting where I was. And in that case, I needed the pressure of being before strangers to make sure that I knew that speech cold and could get through those moments where my brain froze.
Mhm.
So I really had to keep doing that with new audiences.
Okay.
And what I did, in fact, if anybody remembers 2018, I workshopped the heck out of that speech. I was probably in front of 20 different audiences during that time, and especially with the larger audiences, I would hand out a feedback sheet that I wanted people to fill out.
Mhm.
And when I did this, I did it at a TLI, um, and we had probably 80 people, 90 people in the audience. So it was huge, and one of the pieces, and the thing to remember about getting feedback is everybody's got an opinion. Um, a lot of them can be helpful, but if you find yourself changing your speech for every opinion that you get, you'll never settle on what's good. Um, so I think anybody can respond to this is how the speech made me felt. But when it comes to the technical content, you decide what you're going to adapt and adopt into your story and what you're not going to. Because when I did it at the TLI, somebody gave me a feedback sheet and they killed me. It was like, ratings 1 to 5 on all these different scales. Everything is 1, 1, 1, 1, like awful. And they said, they wrote in like big scrawls on there, this is not a contest speech. This has no value for Toastmasters. And just all these things that were, kind of hurt my feelings. But after 5 minutes, I was like, I really wanted to know who wrote that. Not because I wanted to out them or get angry with them. It was like, wow, this really hit a nerve with you. Tell me more. Because I wanted to find out, okay, why did this resonate so poorly with them? And I may or may not have chosen to incorporate that in the story, but I thought it was really helpful to get the range of reactions from people. Because over time, you kind of said, okay, this works and this doesn't. And it made sense of what I kept and what I threw out.
The first time I practiced with a new club, getting ready to go into the district level, and somebody looked at me with same thing, feedback sheets and all this kind of stuff, and they just tore me apart with, you don't have a speech, you have a great story, but you don't have a speech. And that sounded, I was like, I'm at the district level, I can't change that much now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So question, and I heard Elisa say it earlier about Narayan and Cheryl, but did you have a coach or a speech coach, speech mentor who helped you? At what level did you get it? So where were you at in the contest group, area, division? And would you recommend it? Or what do you want to tell me about it? How's that?
I think there's a range of coaching that you can do. I think Winner's Circle is a great platform for getting that skilled feedback of people who've done this a few times.
Mhm.
And for most people, that's perfectly fine. There's also really a cottage industry of speech coaches for Toastmasters, and if you win at the district, that's I think that was another rule change they had. You're going to get marketed to by some of the former champions, because that's what they do for a living now is they coach
Mhm.
Toastmaster speakers.
Mhm.
Um, and won't mention any names, but if you, I don't know if Elisa, if you've had them reach out to you, but
Yeah.
I'm on their list. They've got my
I was like,
birthday.
no, thank you. I have
Yeah,
people. I
yeah,
have
I
winner
get, yeah,
circle. I don't need you.
yeah. And then that being said, I actually have been coached by Darren LaCroix and Craig Valentine a couple times. Um, but that to me was not so much as for winning, quote unquote, as to say, okay, how do you do this? What are the big things that you need to really focus on to be good? So it's more to be good than to win. And I've got a couple friends who are professional speakers who I work with almost every time, um, because they've got enough stage time and audience experience to say, Dave, this works for you, or this feels really hokey for you. They know me well enough
Mhm. Mhm.
to know when I'm trying too hard.
Okay. Well, we are coming up on our time. I can see the green light has popped up there. I want to give our two panelists the ability to say anything that I've missed, any questions I've missed, anything that you want to tell the people who are looking to step into this contest season and these new roles. What's your advice for them? Again, I'm going to kind of go ladies first. So, Elisa?
I think that we don't have as much commute time as we had pre-COVID, but you can use your commute time, or now I use the treadmill. When I'm on the treadmill, I practice my speeches. I just run through all the speeches that I have ever done, all the speeches that I've ever memorized. And because you want to have a speech in your back pocket all the time in case something happens, somebody needs a speaker. But also, sometimes people don't write their speech until right before the contest. There's no rule that says you can't write a speech 2 years before you plan to perform it.
Mm-hmm.
So write the speech, memorize the speech, work on the speech. And so my process is now I write the speech and I record a draft of it, and then I listen to that while I'm doing the dishes or moving around my house, whatever. And then I think about, okay, how could that be better? And then I also listen to it when I'm on the treadmill, and I start, sometimes speeches come to me when I'm on the treadmill because, again, your right and left brain are talking to each other while you're moving. And so then I'll start just speaking it and recording the speech auditorily, and then go back and transcribe that. And then I just keep going through a process of revise, do this again, revise, do this again.
Mm-hmm.
That's working for me really well. But practicing, like when I did the area contest 2 years ago, I practiced that speech at least 500 times before I performed it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing.
David?
Yeah, for me, I would say number one, get in the contest. Do something, because it's like the lottery. You can't win if you don't play. But the good thing about this compared to the lottery is the more you play, the more you're likely to win.
Yeah.
And you will get better over time. So get in the contest regardless of your current, where you are in your current journey. Second is I'm a big believer in stories, and tell a personal story that happened to you. Um, there's a lot of chatter out there about one of the winners that one of their stories who I love, both their semifinal and the final speech. Well, that didn't happen. Well, maybe not, but it's a damn good story. Because there's no rule that says your story has to be true. Now, for me, I would feel that is inauthentic. I think everybody has stories in their lives that are useful in turning them into speeches that can have an impact on other people. So I think you should tell a personal story, then find the one big idea that thing hangs on, so that's something that people can take with them and remember. So if you bring yourself into this, touch people's emotions, and leave them with one thought, whether you win or not. I think you'll be a winner, even though that may sound like a cliche. Is you'll be a better speaker, and over time you'll get a boatload of trophies to put on your mantle as well.
Perfect. I want to say thank you to both of you. This has been a great panel. I hope the audience got some things out of it and are encouraged to move forward. I know I am looking forward to the contest season, although I may have to find myself some coaches now I listen to you guys. You guys are great, and I really appreciate you taking your time on a Saturday morning to come here and offer some advice and some information to everybody else.
All right.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
No-